know me by now. I'm Shmuel Herzfeld, the rabbi of Ohev Sholom, the National Synagogue, and I'm here with my personal attorney, Stephen Lieberman, who's, I believe, the single greatest attorney in the world. And Steve is also the attorney who represents the Coalition of Jewish Concerns, Amcha. Steve has been representing me for over a decade, and he's represented Rabbi Avi Weiss for many more years than that. And we're not, hopefully over time on the Rabbi Shmuel show, we'll be able to get into all of the work that Steve has done for us. And we're the only client who's never, ever late with paying Steve. He does it all pro bono. But now, specifically, I want to focus on the issue of Venezuela, because Steve's office recently won a tremendous victory in the pursuit of bringing justice to the Jews of Venezuela and raising awareness about it. So, Steve, can you fill us in with what's going on in Venezuela and your work?
Of course. Good evening, Rabbi Shmuel. Back in February of 2009, Rabbi Herzfeld and Rabbi Avi Weiss visited the Jewish community in Caracas, Venezuela, to investigate reports that the Chavez government had instigated attacks on the Jewish community there. Approximately half of the Jewish community in Caracas had been forced to leave the country in the previous 5 years because conditions were so bad. And what Rabbis Herzfeld and Weiss found was that leaders of the Jewish community came to them and said, look, we are afraid for our lives, literally for our lives. We are afraid of a pogrom. We are afraid of being physically annihilated by Hugo Chavez and his supporters. And we need the international community to focus on what's going on here in Venezuela. As a result of that, Rabbi Herzfeld and Rabbi Weiss spoke with Sammy Eppel, who was a very courageous leader in the Jewish community in Caracas. Sammy is someone who's been threatened physically with violence by the Chavez government. And Sammy Eppel and Amcha brought a lawsuit in the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights against Hugo Chavez. And what they asked the commission to do was to investigate what the Chavez government had been doing in Venezuela, to investigate the grenade attacks on synagogues, the police intimidation of Jewish institutions, the anti-Semitic statements that have been made by government officials, including Hugo Chavez, who, interestingly, has said that the Jewish community is responsible for crucifying Christ and having done the same thing to Simon Bolivar. He said on national television that the Jewish community has accumulated all of the wealth of the world and that it is in their hands, and an obvious effort to hark back to the oldest and vilest canards against the Jewish community. And it worked. He's instigated a lot of anti-Semitism in Venezuela.
There's tremendous fear in the Jewish community in Venezuela, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I should point out that I was able to sit with the Cardinal of Venezuela, and there's tremendous fear not only in the Jewish community, but in many, many people in Venezuela. Well, let's get to this matter. The Inter-American Commission. Right. What did they rule?
So, what the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights issued a report in January of this year in which they found that the Chavez government, number one, had been part of instigating attacks on the Jewish community, physical attacks on the Jewish community. There was a grenade attack on a synagogue. There were break-ins. There was one synagogue that was defaced with anti-Semitic and Nazi slogans. And it was determined that government officials played a role in that attack. Number two, there was a determination by the commission that the Chavez government was actively interfering in the investigation of those incidents.
What does that mean, actively interfering?
Well, that they were putting pressure on witnesses not to testify accurately. There had been a previous finding by the Inter-American Commission that the judicial system in Venezuela is seriously flawed, because what Hugo Chavez has said is that any judge who rules against the Chavez government is a traitor to Venezuela.
So the Inter-American Commission has basically said that the government was complicit in these attacks upon the Jews, and not only were they complicit, they were also involved in making sure that the real perpetrators were not found. So the question I have is, who is this Inter-American Commission? Is this an important organization?
Yeah, the answer is no and yes. No, in that the Inter-American Commission cannot impose sanctions on Hugo Chavez. The Inter-American Commission cannot force Chavez to behave differently, but what it can do is something that too few organizations, in fact no organizations, did during the Shoah, during the Second World War. It has focused international attention on what the Chavez government has done. And what it did in the last paragraph of the section on the Jewish community in Venezuela, what it did was it said, we are watching what you do, Hugo Chavez. We're going to continue to watch what you do, and if you cause harm to the Jewish community, you will be punished. That is a very, very powerful statement for an international organization to make.
Yeah. Now, Steve, I first of all, I thank you for this tremendous work that you've done on this case. It's very, very holy work. But let's focus on one point here. Recently, there was a work published by William Cohen and Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of Defense and former Secretary of State, talking about what allows genocide to take place. And do you think that there's a connection at all between what's going on in their research and what's going on in Venezuela?
Yes, I do. And in fact, we had cited the Cohen and Albright work to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. What they do is they've studied past instances of genocide, and essentially what they've concluded is that if governments do nothing to bring to the attention of the world what is going on, and if governments do nothing to stop those events from occurring, they will happen. And they said that what governments have to do is they have to act proactively to shine attention on areas of the world where genocide is becoming possible. And that by shining attention on those events, you can actually prevent the genocide from occurring. You show the evildoers that the world is watching. And that is exactly what the Commission did. The Commission followed the advice of Secretary Albright and Secretary Cohen and said to Hugo Chavez, we're watching you. And if you keep doing this and harm results, you will be held responsible. You will be punished.
Steve, one last question. This will be an easy one for you. Okay, this is an easy question. Do you believe...
Whenever a rabbi says the question is an easy question, you know that it's not.
Well,
but go ahead.
This is an easy question. Based upon the Inter-American Commission's findings and our evidence, which is tremendous, and it will be posted on the web, etc. The report that we filed is readily available. You just email me at my synagogue, and I'll be happy to give you the report as well. But based upon your evidence, do you think it's possible that if Hugo Chavez comes to America, he could be arrested? Could there be any reason that he could be arrested on the basis of the crimes that he's already committed?
You know, I think that's a very good question, and it's something that we're actively looking into. And he should be afraid. He should be very afraid, because the world will not silently stand by and allow him to continue to do to the Jewish community what he is actively engaged in.
Does he get immunity because he's a head of another country?
You know, it's very hard to do anything to the chief of another country, the chief of state. There are so many protections in international law, but he isn't always going to be the head of that government. And there are historical examples of instances in which foreign leaders have been held accountable for civil rights violations in their countries. So he should be very concerned. If there is physical harm caused to the Jewish community, if people are killed as a result of the government's actions, or the government's cover-ups, or the government's inactions, he will be held responsible one way or the other. And the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights report is a beacon telling him that he needs to watch out.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your work. My friends of the Rabbi Shmuel Show, we'll be hearing a lot from Steve Lieberman over the coming years, decades to come. But for now, you heard it here first. Hugo Chavez, be very afraid because we are watching you. Thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi Shmuel.